The floor is yours.
Okay, I will begin anyway. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here first time in the morning. My aim here is to present several elements about J.R.R. Tolkien's literary universe, especially the ones concerning representations of water. I'm going to focus on the natural element of water. And I will pay attention to the symbols related to afterlife or also paradise. I will discuss later that they are two different concepts. And the main interest here is to discuss how the different texts that Tolkien read during his scholar period had an influence on how he represented afterlife or paradise in his universe, and what is the role of the sea or other sources of water related to this element of paradise. As I said, the main thesis question is, how do the texts that Tolkien read when he was younger, how do they affect his literary production in the question of representing paradise or afterlife, and if there is any relationship or any parallelism between both of them. This is more or less the series of contents that I'm going to present. I will begin with the theoretical framework and explaining a couple of elements concerning the literary approach that I have used for this research. After that, I will present the different examples, the different texts related to different mythologies or different cultures that Tolkien read during his life that had an influence on his career. Before mentioning his own works, I will mention a couple of experiences that he lived during his experience where the sea was involved somehow during his personal life. And apart from that, I will present the text that he wrote during his career and how are they related to the previous ones from Greek or Latin literature, from Norse literature, and also a couple of details about ideas from the Bible, because he was very familiar with it as well. And I will finally make a brief comment about how Tolkien's representations of the sea in his career have been preserved during modern adaptations of his own works. This is, for example, the different movie trilogies that have been shot, or also the very recent TV show of Rings of Power. And after that, I will finish with a couple of conclusions. Okay, as I said, the theoretical framework that must be taken into account for this research is, first of all, the literary approach of eco-criticism. Anytime that one questions about the relationship between literature and the natural environment or any natural element that plays a specific role in a plot, one must go and check the literary approach of eco-criticism. Some key authors from this approach are, for example, Cheryl Glofelty. I've included a quote by her here, is that eco-criticism is basically the relationship or the study between the relationship between literature and the environment. Anytime that a natural element has a symbol associated to it, we must pay attention to this research. It started very few decades ago. It's a very recent approach and it's still developing, but it is very interesting anyway. If we move to the specific element that I'm going to focus on, which is the sea, many authors have done lots of research about the sea and the symbols associated to it, and they come with many different conclusions. Most of them agree that the sea can be understood as a place for recovery, for relief, for healing. All of them considered positive symbols or benign symbols. But on the other side, we can also agree that the sea is often a place where characters in stories are tested, or they have to face danger, they have to overcome some obstacles. So many authors, like Susana Fidalgo that I mentioned there, or Gabriela Silva Rivero, they have both perspectives. They mention both sides. They have negative connotations and they also have positive connotations. And apart from that, if I also take a look at the concept of paradise or afterlife, the authors who have researched about this symbol, who are Juan Eduardo Guirlot, for example, who wrote a dictionary of symbols in Spanish, or also Jean Chevalier, who wrote another one, they have different conclusions about the concept of afterlife or paradise. For example, Kirlot mentions that paradise is considered the mystical center of existence, but also Chevalier mentions, for example, that it is somehow more than a physical place. Paradise should be considered more like a state, a spiritual state that one reaches after our physical life. Okay, sorry, because some of the pictures are failing in the presentation, but anyway. In this slide, I wanted to make the difference between the two concepts I've been mentioning, which are paradise and afterlife, because afterlife could be considered like a broader term. Afterlife, according to a definition by the Oxford English Dictionary, could be considered as any kind of life after death, and it is usually considered a permanent life, a permanent condition. That those who believe in afterlife, of course, it is like a permanent condition after our physical life. But if we pay attention to the concept of paradise, it is not as broad as the concept of afterlife, because it is only one example or one perspective for afterlife. Paradise is like only one of the benign conceptions of of afterlife, because some other conceptions of afterlife can be more negative. Some cultures believe in hell or some other realities apart from paradise, which is a more rightful perspective of afterlife. Paradise is like a place where we find peace, relief, and also scholars often agree that paradise is in a permanent state of spring, where we find also beauty, music, and any kind of good feelings that we can find there. So the following examples that I'm going to present now from previous cultures before Tolkien wrote his works are going to represent both different ideas. And the important thing I want to mention before I come to the specific examples is that in all the examples we are going to see, there is always a body of water. It is usually the sea, but in other cases there are rivers or lakes and other sources of water that are always present in different cultures. For example, the first one I'm going to cover, sorry, the image is failing again, is an example from Latin literature. I'm going to talk about the Aeneid, which is the text where some characters are going to overcome death, and they meet the figure of Charon, which is the character who is in charge of carrying the dead corpses to the afterlife. This figure is often represented as a ferryman who carries dead corpses in a boat, and they always have to pay a price in order to be able to carry out this trip. As you see, in this case, there is always a body of water. There are usually rivers, because they usually say that the underworld is divided into different parts because they are separated by rivers. So this is the way that the dead must travel by. But in the other hand, we have the case of the Odyssey, which belongs to Greek literature. And in this case, one image of afterlife that we find is the Elysium, which is completely different to the underworld. It's not a bad image of afterlife. In this case, it is a space where the dead must reach after, and they must go beyond underworld to reach this place. So it is, again, like a test. They must go across the underworld and across the rivers that are in the underworld to reach the Elysium. Here you have some passages where you can see the exact description. In this case, the Elysium is described as a place of beauty, which is always with the sun shining and all kinds of beauty and relief there. Apart from this, if we move to a different kind of literature, if we go to Norse literature, Tolkien was very familiar with it. There are also references where characters in the Icelandic sagas, for example, also have a version of afterlife. After they fight bravely in battles, they also have the opportunity to travel to a place, to another version of paradise. In Norse literature, many of you will be familiar with the concept of Valhalla. So this is the place where they travel after they die in battle. And in some examples, like here in the Saga of the Volsungs, which Tolkien was very familiar with, we have the figure of Odin himself, who is represented as the character responsible for carrying the dead to the other side of a fjord, in this case. For example, if we read this passage, we have Sigmund, who is the famous hero Sigurd's father, and he has a friend who dies in a conflict, and when they are traveling next to a source of water, a man, the name is not mentioned, but thanks to all the clues that you read throughout the text, you can guess that he is Odin himself portrayed here. He is again a man with a boat who offers himself to carry this dead body to the other side of the fjord. If you read the description there, the ferryman carries the body and they disappear progressively. They get lost in offside. And again, as you see here, there is also a body of water mentioned here, and it is the stage that he must go over to reach afterlife. And finally, before moving to Tolkien's experiences, I would like to mention a couple of details about the descriptions from the Bible, where we also have references for the paradise. In this case, it is directly defined as the paradise, then the word is mentioned here. And once again, we have references to rivers, which are mentioned here in the biblical paradise. There are also rivers that help to make life flourish in this place. And you see lots of vegetation, lots of trees, everything is beautiful. You have lots of different details that provide this benign conception of paradise here. And again, before mentioning Tolkien's works, I would like to mention two different experiences, two anecdotes that Tolkien lived during his life. He was very familiar with sea voyages since he was very young. He was born in 1892, and he was 3 years old when he had to face his first long time sea voyage with his mother. He had to move to England. And during that time, he had to travel from South Africa to England, which was a very exciting experience, but also he provided him with lots of memories that would already bring influences to his career. And the other experience I would like to mention is a little bit later, when World War I came, he also had to face a sea voyage because he had to cross the English Channel, and that was a more dangerous experience. But again, both experiences were influences for him, because he would have influence here, and he would portray the sea in a specific way during his throughout his works related to these experiences. Okay, and now if we go to his most iconic works, which are the Silmarillion or the Lord of the Rings, we can find that his personal portrayal of paradise in the Silmarillion, for example, is the place called Valinor. At the first time, if we start reading the Silmarillion, it is mentioned as a physical place. It exists within Middle-earth, with the rest of the physical universe that he created. It was joined together with the rest of regions, with the only exception that most of the events during the Silmarillion of the Lord of the Rings happened in Middle-earth, which was a continent, and it was separated from Aman, the Undying Lands, where Valinor was placed. And we see there that most characters had to move throughout the sea. They have to cross a sea to reach this place of Valinor. The descriptions about Valinor are also fond of details. Again, we have Valinor described as a place where all characters are in peace. They are surrounded by beauty, and music is always there. And the characters who move from Middle-earth to this other place, they often go there to find some healing or some relief because of a disgrace that has happened to them. But anyway, as I said at the beginning, Valinor is mentioned as a place that is joined to the rest of continents. But as we keep reading the Silmarillion, this changes, because after some events, which especially the fall of Númenor, for example, it is an island in the middle of the sea with a civilization that is after tempted to defy the beings that live in Valinor. This catastrophe ends with the sinking of the island of Númenor, and another result, another consequence of this conflict that I am mentioning now is that the region or the place where Valinor exists is separated from the rest of the world. As I am mentioning here, in the second passage, we can read that the rest of the continent is being separated from the other place. The difference from this point on is that the straight road, or the straight way, as you prefer to say, is no longer available for travelers. Only some people, some elves especially, are allowed to go to this place of Valinor. They must be worth of this journey. They must prove that they deserve to cross the sea and reach this place. If you remember, for example, in Lord of the Rings, only the main characters such as Frodo or Gandalf, they are allowed at the end of the story to travel to this place, because it is no longer available for mortal men, for example. They are no longer available, they are no longer able to cross this place. And the last comment I would like to make concerning Tolkien's works is that, as I mentioned before, the figure of Charon in Greek literature, who was like the guide or the person in charge of carrying people to the underworld, in Tolkien's works we also find this kind of figure. I would like to mention 3 different characters who play this role throughout the story. First of all, if we read the first chapters of the Silmarillion, when the elves awake in Middle-earth, because they don't awake in the exact place of Valinor, they awake in a different place. The figure of Orome, who is one of the Valar, he is the first being who is in charge of accompanying the elves to the sea. He follows them to the sea. He shows them the way. So he's the first person who helps them to reach Valinor. On the second place, we have Ulmo, who is the most important Valar, the most important being related to water. He's the master of the seas. And he's the second person who helps some of the elves, because not all of them want to cross the sea and go to Valinor. But Ulmo helps most of them moving an island through the sea. He moves a whole island so that the elves can get into it and then cross the sea and reach Valinor. So he's another figure who is in charge of helping the elves to cross the sea. And finally, if we focus more on the concept of paradise or transcending the physical life, we have the figure of Mandos. I don't have the picture either here, but he's another of the Valar who is the specific being in charge of judging who are able to transcend physical life and have another life in Valinor. So he's like the judge who decides who is worth or who isn't. And just to finish, I would like to show you the only adaptation that we have seen so far in audiovisual material. In the recent TV show from the Rings of Power, we have a scene where we have a representation of Valinor as a physical place. This was on the Second Age, before it was separated from the physical world. I don't know if I can play the scene from this keyboard. Yeah, thank you. It's just a minute, so you can see it. Yeah, perfect. See? It has no volume, but well, with the image it's going to be enough. If you see here some of the elves who have proved worth, they are allowed to cross the sea and reach Valinor. see here after a sea voyage, everything that surrounds them begins to be beautiful, creature, music, as you can see here. I think I'm going to leave it here because this is the most important part. As you can see here, the representation in the TV show is quite faithful to the original source from the book, even with the fact that the TV show as a whole has been criticized for many details. But in this specific issue, it has been faithful, in my opinion. So to sum up, I would like to mention a couple of conclusions. As you have seen here, Tolkien's works have been representative with the different concept of afterlife or paradise that he read during his scholar period, because of the text that he read during his scholar period. And also another very important detail is that he has kept the figure of the guide. The all different characters in older texts have been preserved. The figure of the guide is still in Tolkien's works. And finally, as I just said, that the representation of Valinor, or what we have been able to see so far, has been faithful to original text by Tolkien. Okay, and that would be all. I would be happy to answer any question that you may have later after my two mates finish as well. That would be all. Thank you.